Let's get right into it. Number 1, 79 AD. So, you think your landlord turning off the heating is a tragedy? Try living in Pompeii in 79 AD. This is the year Mount Vesuvius decided to stop being a scenic mountain and start being a thermodynamic nightmare. We aren't just talking about a little lava. This eruption released thermal energy 100,000 times greater than the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombings combined. Imagine a pressure cooker the size of a mountain suddenly blowing its lid. It buried the cities of Pompeii and Herculaneum under so much ash and pumice that archaeologists are still finding people frozen in their final oh no moments. The pyroclastic surges, which is a fancy science word for super fast, super hot gas clouds, cooked everything in their path instantly. It's actually terrifying when you think about it. 1 minute you're enjoying some grapes and debating Roman politics, and the next minute the sky turns black and the air turns into fire. It wasn't just a bad day. It was nature effectively hitting the delete button on 2 entire cities. Number 2, 165 AD. Moving into the 2nd century, we hit 165 AD. This is when the Roman Empire learned a very hard lesson about international travel. Soldiers returning from campaigns in the Near East brought back something way worse than postcards, the Antonine plague. Historians think it was likely smallpox or measles, but whatever it was an absolute beast. It killed somewhere between 5 to 10 million people. To put that in perspective, that's like wiping out the entire population of New York City, but without any modern hospitals to help. It devastated the Roman army and wrecked the economy because, shockingly, it's hard to trade goods when everyone is dying. It caused massive social unrest and weakened the empire significantly. It's like the universe looked at the Roman Golden Age and said, yeah, let's turn the difficulty setting up to nightmare mode for a bit. Number 3, 251 AD. If you thought the 2nd century was rough, 251 AD is here to hold its beer. This year brought us the plague of Cyprian. This nasty outbreak was killing up to 5,000 people per day in Rome alone. Imagine the daily news report just being a guy screaming. It was likely smallpox or a viral hemorrhagic fever, basically something out of a horror movie that causes you to bleed from places you really shouldn't. This plague hit right when the empire was already having a midlife crisis, leading to severe instability. Emperor Decius, looking for someone to blame, decided to scapegoat the Christians, leading to brutal persecutions. So you had a deadly pandemic, economic collapse, and state-sponsored religious violence all happening at once. It was a chaotic mess that nearly broke the Roman Empire in half. Number 4, 365 AD. Fast forward to 365 AD. Just when people thought the ground was safe, a massive earthquake struck near Crete. This wasn't a little wobble. It triggered a tsunami that absolutely leveled Alexandria and other coastal cities. We're talking ships being thrown onto the roofs of houses. While nature was throwing a tantrum, the geopolitical situation was also going down the toilet. This era kicked off the massive Hunnic migrations. The Huns started pushing tribes like the Goths into Roman territory, which is essentially a domino effect of armed refugees. It all set the stage for the Battle of Adrianople a few years later, which was a total disaster for Rome. But 365 AD stands out because you had the literal earth trying to kill you while entire nations were shifting borders. It was the year stability officially left the chat. Number 5, 410 AD. 410 AD is basically the year the neighborhood watch failed spectacularly. For the first time in 800 years, Rome, the eternal city, was sacked by a foreign enemy. The Visigoths, led by King Alaric, rolled up and effectively looted the place. Psychologically, this was devastating. It would be like if aliens landed and took over the White House. It shattered the idea of invincibility. It symbolized the terminal decline of the Western Roman Empire. Meanwhile, just to add insult to injury, Attila the Hun was warming up in the bullpen for his invasion of Gaul a few decades later, but 410 was the year the light started flickering out in the West. It proved that even the biggest empires can get knocked out if they get complacent. Number 6, 536 AD. Okay, brace yourselves. Historians often call 536 AD the literal worst year to be alive, ever. Why? because the sun essentially clocked out. Massive volcanic eruptions, likely in Iceland or North America, threw so much ash into the atmosphere that it caused an 18-month volcanic winter. Temperatures plummeted, crops failed globally, and famine spread like wildfire. Imagine it's noon in summer, but it looks like twilight and you can see your breath. It was gloomy, cold, and everyone was starving. This climate disaster weakened the population just in time for the plague of Justinian to hit a few years later. It was the perfect storm of misery. If 536 AD was a movie review, it would be 0 stars. Would not recommend to a friend. Number 7. 664 AD. Jump to the 7th century. In 664 AD, the Yellow Plague hit Britain and Ireland. It didn't just kill peasants, it wiped out monasteries, which were the main centers of learning and leadership back then. It was a massive disruption to society, kind of like if all the universities and government buildings shut down at once. Earlier in the century, in 632 AD, the death of the Prophet Muhammad triggered the Ridda Wars and massive internal conflict in the emerging Islamic world. Between the biological warfare of the Yellow Plague and the political vacuums in the Middle East, the 7th century was a time of massive transition and bloodshed. It was a period where the map of the world was being redrawn in red ink. Number 8. 750 AD. In 750 AD, we saw the Abbasid revolution. This wasn't a polite changing of the guard, it was a violent overthrow of the Umayyad Caliphate. The Battle of the Zab was the decisive moment, leading to a bloody purge of the Umayyad family. It was basically Game of Thrones, but real. The survivors were hunted down, and it sparked a widespread civil war across the Islamic world. This year marked a massive shift in power from Damascus to Baghdad, changing the culture of the Islamic Golden Age, but the cost was incredibly high. Revolutions are rarely clean, but 750 AD was particularly messy. Number 9. 865 AD. 865 AD is when the Vikings decided to stop doing small raids and started a full-scale corporate takeover. They formed the Great Heathen Army, which admittedly is a fantastic name for a metal band, and launched a 14-year conquest of England. They sacked monasteries, burned towns, and collapsed entire kingdoms. This wasn't just grab the gold and run. This was, we live here now. The disruption to Anglo-Saxon society was total. Imagine looking out your window and seeing thousands of angry Norsemen who want your land, your food, and your head. 865 AD was the year the nightmares of England became a reality. Number 10. 907 AD. Heading into the 10th century, 907 AD marks the collapse of the Tang dynasty in China. The Tang era was a high point of Chinese civilization, so when it fell hard. It plunged the country into the 5 dynasties and 10 kingdoms period. That name sounds poetic, but the reality was warlord chaos. Millions died from the resulting warfare and famine. It was a free-for-all power struggle, where the average person suffered the most. Meanwhile, over in Europe, Viking raids were still a thing, and the Abbasids were declining. But the sheer scale of death in China makes 907 a standout year for misery. It's like shattering a beautiful porcelain vase and then rolling around in the shards. Number 11. 1099 AD. 1099 AD is the year the First Crusade culminated in the capture of Jerusalem. Now, regardless of whose side you're on in history, this event was a bloodbath. When the Crusaders breached the walls, they massacred tens of thousands of Muslims and Jews. Streets reportedly ran red with blood. This event didn't just end a war, it fueled centuries of hatred and conflict that we are arguably still dealing with today. It also coincided with famine and disease in parts of Europe, proving that misery loves company. 1099 stands as a grim reminder of what happens when religious zealotry meets military steel. Number 12. 1138 AD. While 1177 AD was a mess politically with the Battle of Montgisard and the crumbling Angkor Empire, 1138 AD takes the cake for sheer immediate destruction. The Aleppo earthquake in Syria was catastrophic. It killed an estimated 230,000 people. Just try to wrap your head around that number for a medieval society. It was so devastating that it actually shifted trade routes because the cities were just gone. It forced trade to move to sea routes because the land was too ruined to traverse safely. When an earthquake is so bad it changes the economic map of the world, you know it's a contender for the worst year ever. Number 13, 1258 AD. 1258 AD is a year that still hurts to talk about for historians. The Mongols, led by Hulagu Khan, sacked Baghdad. This effectively ended the Islamic Golden Age. They destroyed the House of Wisdom, throwing so many books into the Tigris River that legend says the water ran black with ink. It was a cultural lobotomy for humanity. Hundreds of thousands were killed. But wait, there's more. This coincided with the aftermath of the 1257 Mount Somalis eruption. The volcanic ash caused a global cooling effect, leading to crop failures and famines worldwide. So you had the destruction of the world's intellectual center and the climate disaster happening at the exact same time. Talk about bad timing. Number 14, 1347 AD. 1347 AD is the year the Black Death officially clocked in for work in Europe. Arriving on Genoese ships from the siege of Kaffa, the plague bacteria, hitching a ride on fleas, on rats, unleashed hell. We are talking about a mortality rate that wiped out an estimated 1/3 of Europe's population. Imagine 1 out of every 3 people you know just vanishing. Globally, it killed around 200 million people. Europe was already weak from the Great Famine of 1315, so their immune systems were basically non-existent. 1347 kicked off the most devastating pandemic in human history. It was the year the Grim Reaper got Employee of the Month. Number 15, 1453 AD. In 1453, the Ottoman Empire finally captured Constantinople, ending the Byzantine Empire. This was the final heartbeat of the old Roman world stopping. The siege involved massive cannons blasting through ancient walls, followed by the usual looting, enslavement, and massacres. It created a massive refugee crisis as scholars fled west, which on the bright side helped spark the Renaissance. But in the moment, pure chaos. That same year, the Ottomans failed to take Belgrade, but the casualties were horrific there too. 1453 was a year of massive geopolitical shifts, where the map was redrawn in blood and gunpowder. Number 16, 1520 AD. 1520 AD is a tragic year for the Americas. Smallpox, introduced by Europeans, began to tear through the indigenous populations. Since the native people had no natural immunity, the mortality rates were up to 90%. It absolutely decimated the Aztec Empire, which is the main reason a small force of Spaniards was able to conquer them. It wasn't just guns and steel, it was germs. Imagine a disease so bad that it collapses your entire civilization structure before the invaders even finish the job. It's a biological apocalypse that changed the demographic of a continent forever. Number 17. 1644 AD, China cannot catch a break. In 1644, the Ming dynasty collapsed due to a combination of rebellion and Manchu invasion. This transition was incredibly bloody, leading to decades of warfare. This chaos coincided with the Little Ice Age, a period of global cooling that caused famine everywhere. The estimated death toll from the transition from Ming to Qing is around 25 million people. Between the freezing weather, the starvation, and the armies marching back and forth, 1644 was a year where survival was a luxury item. Number 18, 1783. AD was a year where the planet tried to poison everyone. The Laki eruption in Iceland was a fissure eruption that spewed out millions of tons of sulfur dioxide. It created a Laki haze across Europe that poisoned crops and caused respiratory failure in humans and livestock. Meanwhile, the climate anomalies caused by the eruption triggered the Shalisa famine in India, which killed up to 11 million people. It connects the dots in a terrifying way. A volcano blows in Iceland and millions starve in India. It shows just how fragile our global food systems really are. Number 19, 1816 AD. Following the massive 1815 eruption of Mount Tambora in Indonesia, 1816 became known as the year without a summer. Global temperatures dropped so much that it snowed in June in New England. Crops failed across Europe, North America, and Asia. It led to the worst famine of the 19th century. People were reduced to eating grass and rats. It was so gloomy that Mary Shelley, stuck inside due to the bad weather, wrote Frankenstein. So, we got a good book out of it, but the cost was global starvation and social unrest. Number 20. 1918 AD. 1918 was a double punch to the gut of humanity. You had the final bloody year of World War I, where millions were being fed into the meat grinder of trench warfare. And then, just for fun, nature introduced the Spanish flu. This strain of influenza killed an estimated 50 million people, more than the war itself. It targeted young, healthy people, turning their immune systems against them. So you had soldiers surviving the horrors of the trenches only to come home and die in their beds. It was a year of global grief on a scale that is hard to comprehend. Number 21. 2020 AD, and finally, number 21. You knew this was coming. 2020, the year the world stood still. The COVID-19 pandemic swept the globe, causing millions of deaths, economic ruin, and forcing us all to learn what Zoom fatigue is. But it wasn't just the virus. 2020 also featured massive wildfires in Australia and the US, locust swarms in Africa causing famine, and record-breaking hurricane seasons. Oh, and the massive explosion in Beirut. It was a year of civil unrest, political polarization, and isolation. It felt like the writers of the simulation just threw every possible disaster into a blender and hit puree. It's the year we are all still recovering from. So there you have it. A tour through history's hall of shame. From volcanoes that blot out the sun to plagues that wipe out empires, it turns out humans have been dealing with unprecedented times for about 2,000 years. If you made it through this video without hiding under your bed, congratulations, you're a survivor. That's it for today's dose of weirdness. Hit the like button and subscribe if your brain feels a few IQ points weirder now. Catch you in the next one.